on to the second playoff game that we have in Miami Gardens, Miami, Florida. That is the Georgia Bulldogs versus the Michigan Wolverines. Want to throw this over to you, Ty, as the Big Ten guy here on the Sportscast. Give me your initial thoughts on this game. I know I, for one, think that this is one of the best matchups we've had in the college football playoff era, in my opinion. Just stylistically, these teams remind me so much of each other. So would love to kind of hear your initial thoughts on this game.
This game to me it could go a couple different directions. The problem I see for Michigan is I believe these teams, like you said, are kind of stylistically, you said they're similar, correct? Yeah. And I see them, I agree with you. They love to play physical, fast on defense. They like to play physical on offense. Well, I'm going to break down the talent numbers in a little bit. Georgia just has better guys. And anytime two teams are almost exactly similar in the style of play they do, the team that just has better guys is going to win that game and could actually win the game by a significant margin. That is one direction I could go. I could see them going out, they both smack each other in the mouth, and Georgia's just better, and they end up winning the game something like I don't think it's going to be that high scoring, but 31-14 or something like that. I do like Josh Gaddis. I think he's a very good offensive coordinator. I think he's a creative guy. I think he has the ability. I mean, when he first got there to Michigan, I thought he tried to be too creative, and I thought it was kind of counterproductive. But he kind of went back, leaned on the run game, and he utilized his athletes in different ways. And that part of Josh Gaddis as an offensive coordinator makes me kind of trust that he's going to do something different with Michigan, understanding that the athletes maybe aren't quite as good matching up. Get a guy like Blake Corum, who's a dynamic guy out in space. Utilize the inside run game while also being able to go outside. Utilize a guy like J.J. McCarthy, who comes in as kind of a flex quarterback, but a guy who's a very good athlete. Get him out in space. Maybe kind of try to utilize some, they don't really have very many mismatches, but try to utilize the really good talent he has in the roster in an effective fashion. And I do trust Josh Gaddis, who's the offensive coordinator of the year in college football. If he's able to do that, and they're also able to force some turnovers, one thing that always worries me about a Kirby Smart team since he's been there is they're kind of stale on offense. They could sometimes just kind of bog down and just rely on, hey, we have 35 stars, you have 0. Let's have fun. And then and that is not effective when he does play better guys. And there is good, there's some great players on the Michigan team. Aiden Hutchinson's the best defensive player in college football. Will Anderson might have an argument. But other than Will Anderson, Aiden Hutchinson's probably the first pick in the draft. So there is some really good players that I think could be able to make some plays on Georgia. And if Georgia just sits there and tries to bog down, that could end up backfiring on them. So this is an interesting game because I think, as you say, they play like each other. It could be just like dynamo watching each other like smash each other back and forth, but it could also be where Georgia just is playing better. They force some mistakes and they end up rolling by about 3 touchdowns. It's an interesting game. I do think Georgia wins, but I am definitely looking more forward to this matchup than the other one.
Yeah, all really, really great points. And Byron, specifically, I want to pass this over to you from Georgia's perspective. So 12-0 regular season, the best defense in the country, best defense in potentially college football history that was thrown around multiple times throughout this season. They go into the SEC championship game. They're favored against Alabama. Obviously, Kirby Smart has never beaten Alabama, and they get dominated, just flat out dominated. Now, you've had some time for that to settle. And what are your thoughts on how Georgia's going to try to attack this game? What are your thoughts on Stetson Bennett? From all indications, it seems that he's going to be starting this game as well. And do you think that, they have a chance to win this game?
Ooh, Mr. Bennett, he's more of like the typical game manager. That's what he is. He plays within a certain frame, doesn't, turn the ball over a lot, just does his thing, runs, occasionally when he has to. And as long as he doesn't screw up or, he gets tight, from the last fiasco when they played Alabama, they should be fine. As far as, the defensive line got, with Georgia, they probably have a lot to prove, that, when they got blasted by Alabama, the way they did. And, they have to probably redeem themselves, as far as, with the historic numbers of whatever they are throwing around at the time, as far as like, giving up, 7 points a game and all the things they were doing, all the shutouts and everything. And then all of a sudden, they got it put on them by Alabama. And now it's like, we can't have it happen again. All the great things we did this year. We need to redeem ourselves in this game.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, especially because, and going back to some of the things that Ty said as well, is that Alabama attacked Georgia's secondary, something we haven't seen all season long. And they're talented, but young and unproven. And obviously covering a guy like Jamison Williams, that's proven to be really difficult for them. Chris, want to go throw it over to you in the sense of talking about some of the weapons in this game. From a skill position perspective, both on the Michigan and on the Georgia side of things, particularly, there isn't anyone that really stands out to me outside of maybe Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia, as someone that could really be a difference maker in this game. I'm curious to kind of hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that Bowers is a matchup nightmare for just about any team. And I don't know if you guys saw that Michigan might be without Daxton Mills, one of their really good. Yeah, really good DB. He might have COVID. He's rumored to not even be down there with the team. Not having him in the game is going to make that matchup against Bowers even more challenging for Michigan. Outside of that, George Pickens coming back for Georgia. I thought that was an excellent sign for that offense. I still don't know why they've decided to stick with Bennett at quarterback. I thought the chemistry that JT Daniels had with Pickens at the end of last year when they won out was fantastic. So for Georgia to stick with Bennett at quarterback, I think that this is going to have to be more of a game manager. He seems to lock in on Bowers a lot, which is fine for the most part because he's such a dynamic weapon for them. But on the Michigan side, they got two excellent running backs. Unfortunately, that plays right into Georgia's strength. The second best rushing offense in the country against the second best rushing defense. And like Ty said, these are evenly matched teams, but Georgia's got the better roster right now, and I think that's gonna work in their favor as long as Bennett doesn't do anything catastrophic like he did against Alabama. I think Georgia can pull this out in a very close game. This is the best semifinal matchup in the college football playoff era, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've read so much about all the hate that Bennett has taken since the SEC championship game. And granted, he did throw those 2 interceptions, one of them being a pick six. But think about before that and how he's played throughout the season. I think he averaged like 10 yards per attempt, which is a really, really good stat. The guy's a walk-on, and he does a really good job with his legs, extending plays and extending drives on third down. I think they need to go back to that. Another thing, too, that Georgia did in the Alabama game specifically was I think they gave up on the run a little bit too early, even though they started when they started falling behind. And take advantage of Zamir White, take advantage of James Cook, and really, push on that offensive line that's done so well for you throughout the season. And I think that's a great way for them to have success. Ty, I'm curious to learn from Michigan standpoint. You mentioned Josh Gaddis, Chris mentioned some of the running backs. Talk about the quarterback, McNamara. What have you seen from him throughout the season? And how do you think he's going to play in this game?
I mean, my thoughts on McNamara is he's very much kind of a game manager. He's an efficient quarterback. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. I think that's why he starts over J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy, who was a 5-star guy, I think one of the more dynamic quarterbacks to come out last recruiting cycle, I think is a guy that's really going to be the long-term quarterback for Michigan. And I think you will see J.J. McCarthy, who's a terrific athlete, play against Georgia. But I think McNamara, he's solid, he's efficient, he's not going to do anything spectacular, but he's not going to make much mistakes. And I think that's actually why he kept the job over McCarthy, because I think McCarthy's young, probably made some mistakes and just doesn't know the game quite as good. So I think he's an efficient quarterback, but I don't think so. When you're comparing Bryce Young to Stetson Bennett, it's like comparing a future top 5 pick to a guy that's probably going to be at best a undrafted free agent. When you're comparing Cade McNamara to Stetson Bennett, I think McNamara is a guy that's probably a drafted free agent too. I think the guy who gets drafted is going to be JJ McCarthy, and he's not probably going to play other than in kind of a utility role. So I think he's an efficient quarterback. I think he's solid, but I do not think he's the guy that's going to win Michigan the game. If Michigan wins this game, it's because they force some turnovers. I think some of the dynamic running backs like Corum makes some big time plays. And I think Stetson Bennett plays a crappy game. I think that's why. And I know that, to touch on just quickly the whole Stetson Bennett starting, JT Daniels was a highly rated recruit, and he was one of the highest rated recruits coming out. But I saw him at USC. I follow the Pac-12. I saw him even play at Georgia. I just don't think he's that great. So obviously that's why Bennett's better. I know he had a couple good games, but for the most part, I think he's just been a pretty marginal quarterback at the collegiate level. I think he's very overrated because of his high school recruiting ranking. So that's my thoughts on that. Sorry, I just thought I'd delve into that issue a little bit, because there's a lot of hand wringing. Oh, Bennett's starting, and they're not going to play JT Daniels. I'm like, I never thought he was that great.
I agree with you, and I think Kirby's even gone almost as far to basically say that Bennett just flat out beat him out. Beat him out in competition, whether it was at practice or in fall camp. And obviously, JT's had his struggle with his injuries and things like that. But I agree with you. He was just flat out better than him, and that's why he's not out on the field. And I know, there's always been the Bulldog fans that say Kirby has struggled mightily with the quarterback position in terms of talent evaluation, whether that be going back to Jake Fromm and Eason and Justin Fields and all those guys. But Byron, I'm curious to hear your opinion on this. Michigan beats Ohio State. They finally get Jim Harbaugh finally gets a win over the arch rival there. Nobody really expected Michigan at the beginning of the season to challenge for a Big Ten title, much less make the playoff. What do you think the mentality is in that locker room right now? Is it, well, we're just happy to be here, or is it we feel like we can win this thing, the whole thing?
I think they can win it all. Yeah, I'm sure that's the way they're thinking. They got the big guy, Hutchinson. He's probably, he didn't put him on his big back and everything. He's like, what, we can do this. He just seems like that kind of guy that, everybody looks up to. And, he's been there, the Michigan way, been doing it the Michigan way. And I think that, this is their year, that, they're going to do it.
Really?
Love that. Yeah.